This is a Channel Africa podcast. You can also get Channel Africa on satellite PAS10, DSTV Audio Bouquet 802, and OpenView Bouquet Channel 628.
Black History Month is an annual observance in the month of February, originating in the United States of America, where it is also known as African American History Month. It has received official recognition from governments in the United States and Canada, and more recently, we are seeing it being acknowledged in a few African regions as well. Joining me on the line to discuss the impact of the Black History Month and its significance is Dr. Asad el Malik, manager with the Diaspora Project at the African Center for the Study of the United States at Wits University in South Africa. Good evening, Dr. El Malik, and welcome to Africa Tonight.
Good evening. Thank you so much for having me. It is truly an honor and pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. It is a pleasure having you on the show as we talk about this important period for many Black people globally. Dr. El Malik, Black history has undoubtedly shaped world history, though not everyone knows this about the month of February. Perhaps to kick us off, Doctor, give us some background on how Black History Month came about and its impact over the years.
Absolutely. So Black History Month started off as Negro History Week. So Negro was the terminology that African Americans were using at that time. It was started by Dr. Carter G. Woodson. And he wanted to shed light, and I want to make this distinction or this clarity. He wanted to shed light on the African in America, because he made no distinction between African American or Africans on the continent. Yeah. It started off as Negro History Week, and over time it expanded to a month. Oftentimes we hear African Americans say, "Well, we got the shortest month of the year. It was just happenstance, you know." It was not intentional because, again, it started off as Black History Week. And the celebration has grown in a very broad ways, from being something that was taught in Black churches or at predominantly Black schools to something that is taught now across the spectrum of education in the United States. And it has become a sense of pride during the month of February that we are able to look back on the achievements of Africans in the West. I like to make that distinction of Africans in the West, who we call African Americans or Black Americans and Negro, but the distinctions of Africans in the West, a very important month for us.
Mm-hmm. And thanks for that distinction, Doctor. A sense of pride, as you say, that this month of February brings. But this year, the observation of the month, Dr. El Malik, and celebrations come as there are challenges, isn't it, that African Americans are still facing. Earlier this month, New York City Mayor Eric Adams issued a statement recognizing the month and also highlighting the steps he says still need to be taken to achieve racial equity in the U.S. The racial inequality challenges have led to the emergence of movements such as Black Lives Matter movement. Why is it important in your view, Dr. El Malik, for the Black History Month celebrations to cut across various sectors, various industries?
Oh, absolutely, because the story of Africans in the West / African Americans is a story of struggle. We were born in the crucible of slavery. So from the very beginning of our existence in the West, it has been a struggle for equality. It's been a struggle for liberation. It's been a struggle for autonomy and agency. And that struggle continues. And it continues in every sector that you can imagine, from education to politics to relationships to the economy to income to employment. Every sector of the American society must be challenged by this group of people who have literally come from being dehumanized now to being the, as Dr. King would say, the conscious of America.
But when you talk about that, I am reminded of some of the historic figures that have played such a pivotal role when it comes to Black History Month. Some of the historic figures, of course, that come to mind for many when we talk about Black History Month are figures such as Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Rosa Parks, Mary Jackson of NASA, John Coltrane in jazz music, and so many others. How have the prominent African figures, perhaps like Haile Selassie, Thomas Sankara, Fela Kuti, etc., perhaps inspired the current global agenda for social consciousness and change?
Oh, very interesting question. Powerful question. So, as a place, the place of Africa in Black History Month has always been important, and so we celebrate Kwame Nkrumah. We celebrate Haile Selassie, and we celebrate Steve Biko, and we celebrate Patrice Lumumba. All of these names become a part of the lexicon during the Black History Month. As you may know, we for many years our history as Africans was denied to us. So we thank people like Carter G. Woodson for kind of given us a resurrection in terms of our African consciousness, and people like Chancellor Williams and Amos Wilson and Dr. John Henrik Clarke, who created material that forced us to turn our eyes to the continent, and we see the inspiration of the continent in the African American community during the liberation movement in the 50s and 60s on the African continent. That inspired the civil rights movement, the Southern American civil rights movement in the United States. So again, those names that you mentioned all become part of our consciousness during Black History Month, and then we're able to see the interconnectedness between the African struggle in the East or on the continent and the African struggle in the West.
Just talking about the movement and its impact here on the African continent, as you have mentioned, Black History Month celebrations have grown, is it, in African countries such as Ghana, Kenya, Nigeria, and even here in South Africa. But are you getting a sense that more and more Black people, especially here looking at the African continent, they are gravitating towards the Black History Month and also celebrating the role, the importance of this month?
Absolutely. I believe that Black History Month, again, it is the history of Africans in the West, and as we highlight the histories of Africans in the West, it only leads us to highlight the histories of Africans on the continent. And I believe that Black History Month gives Africans worldwide an opportunity to understand this global Black struggle. Black history in America is deeply intertwined with the global struggle against colonialism, against racism, against oppression, and learning about the civil rights movement and the fight against slavery and the ongoing struggles for equality in the United States. It provides valuable insights into the broader global struggle for Black liberation, agency, and autonomy. So I also feel that the world is obviously getting smaller through social media, the use of the internet. So as we are becoming more connected, we're starting to identify how our histories are connected. And it also inspires others to say, wow, African Americans are celebrating Dr. King in South Africa. I want to celebrate Steve Biko or celebrate Nelson Mandela more. Absolutely.
What are the key issues that are at the center of this year's celebrations, Dr. El Malik?
Well, I know at the African Center for the Study of the United States, we've been having a month-long lecture series. Every Wednesday at 1700 hours, you can catch us on Access, ACSUS, VITS YouTube channel, where we will have informative lectures from African American scholars. This week, we have Dr. Blair Proctor, who will be speaking about the connections between Johannesburg and Sophiatown and apartheid and Jim Crow. And it'll be a phenomenal discussion. Next week, I will be speaking on the development of African American Islam in the United States, which is a very niche topic, but it's a very important topic because you get leaders like you mentioned Malcolm X earlier. So Malcolm X comes out of the Black Islamic struggle in the United States.
My guest tonight is Dr. Asad el Malik. He is the manager with the Diaspora Project at the African Center for the Study of the United States at Wits University in South Africa. We are talking about the Black History Month observed during the month of February. It is also known as African American History Month. We are talking about the significance of the month and its impact on blacks across the world. Feel free to join the conversation as we go along on X, Facebook, and on WhatsApp. Our WhatsApp number is 0634069126. That is our number. If you are listening to us outside of South Africa, the number is simply 0027-634069126. Dr. El Malik, do you think that enough is being done, though, at the schooling level to teach students, particularly black students, about black history?
There's always more that can be done, but I'm of the mindset that it is imperative on households, parents, to teach about our history. Church. So I grew up in the African American Baptist Church. It was in the church that I learned about, African American leaders and theologians. It was in the church that we were trained to embrace and love our Black history. So I believe that whereas for those of us who are in the United States, we are a minority, right, in a system that may not always embrace. We hear a lot about the arguments against critical race theory in the schools, right? So they may not always want to embrace our perspective of the history, right? So it is imperative that parents and that church institutions or religious institutions take on the role of becoming also educators to pass on our history and our perspective of historical events.
Yeah, it is an important point that you are making there, isn't it? Because teaching does help students to understand what kind of society they are living in and how this reality came into being, isn't it? But talking about movements such as Black Lives Matter movements, Dr. El Malik, what kind of role do you think that these movements are playing in terms of agitating for the cause of black communities all across the world? Because there has been a lot of prominence that these organizations have gotten over the recent years, isn't it, as they fight for the black people, not only in the United States, but across the world as well. What kind of impact are these movements having?
I think Black Lives Matter is a phenomenal movement, but it's only an extension of a continuum of movements within the African American community, from the abolitionist movement to the civil rights movement to the Black liberation and Black power movement of the 70s to the Black voting movement that gave us candidates like Reverend Jesse Jackson, who ran for president. All of this, the Black Lives movement is just an extension, again, of a continuum of movements in our existence in the United States, as our existence in the United States has always been a struggle against inequality, a struggle against, as the Bible would say, principalities and wickedness in high places.
We are talking to you, Dr. El Malik, as the manager with the Diaspora Project at the African Center for the Study of the United States at Wits University. What kind of challenges are you facing as you fulfill this role? Because I can imagine, what kind of challenges are you facing as you try to advance education and knowledge about Black history, and of course shining the spotlight on the Africans, on the diaspora?
Well, so the role that I play at the center at the African Center for the Study of the United States includes connecting the continent with African American organizations, right? We are a natural constituency. So this includes historically Black colleges and universities, professional organizations, religious institutions, for-profit and nonprofit organizations. And we have kind of three key areas. Number one is public engagement. So this includes webinars and symposiums that we host around diaspora-related issues in conjunction with African American organizations. For instance, we have a webinar coming up with the National Association of Black Journalists that we will host in April. Again, we have our Black History Month programs. Secondly, we kind of work with the second aspect of our program is the cultural exchange and expansion, where we see African and African Americans as, again, a natural constituency, and we seek to foster and improve those relationships. So in April, the National Association of Black Social Workers have agreed to sponsor what we call a summer school program, where we get African American students to come to WITS for 2 weeks and experience the wonderful institution of WITS and learn social work from a global perspective and a South African perspective. And lastly, of course, as academicians, scholarship. So we are working with academicians around the world, around the United States, to produce scholarly articles that are related to the diaspora and the relationship between the continent and Africans in America. Currently, we're working with the National Association of Black Studies and the National Council of Black Studies, and soon we'll be editing a special journal called the Journal of Africana Studies, which is hosted by the National Council of Black Studies. So we have the challenges that any academic institution or academic center would face. It's always, funding or networking. However, we have managed as such a small organization to do a great deal of work with sometimes very limited resources and sometimes very limited staff. But now we've kind of grown a bit here, and we are moving forward.
Apart from the challenges that you are facing as you try to fulfill your role at Wits University, I know that you have immigrated to South Africa about 2 years ago now with your family. I'm keen to find out, how has the move been for you since you moved into South Africa?
Oh man, I absolutely love South Africa. The histories of the two countries are so similar. It's almost like holding a mirror to African Americans. The history of Jim Crow, the history of apartheid. However, what I see in South Africa is such a resilient and brilliant people who in such a short period of time, less than 30 years, have managed to really transform and transmogrify the current the former political condition in South Africa, and such a young democracy, and it has managed to do such great things in such a short period of time. I often tell people, can you imagine what the United States democracy looked like 30 years after its inception? It wasn't until 1965 that African Americans were allowed to even participate in the American democratic system. So as South Africa may have its struggles and it continues to have its struggles, I am very hopeful and inspired to see the progress that South Africa has made. So we moved here to contribute. We moved here to be individuals who love South Africa and who want to see the next 30 years to be as great of an improvement as the last 30 years were.
Yeah. Just talking about the future, but when you look at your crystal ball, looking at what is likely to happen in the future, what kind of a direction do you think that the Black History movement will pivot to? How do you think it will evolve in years to come, in the next 30 years or so to come, do you think?
Interesting. That's a very interesting question. What I think is that Black History Month will begin to and continue to impact the relationship between the Africans on the continent and Africans in the West, including the United States, Jamaica, Haiti, Dominican Republic, Colombia, because those are all Africans also. And what I see is a lot of movement in between these places. I see continental Africans moving into the U.S. and then moving into Central and South America, and vice versa. I see currently we're witnessing what is called Blacksit, in the United States, where African Americans are actually, for the first time in our history, leaving in significant numbers to explore other countries, and a lot of them are on the African continent. So what I see is a lot of movement and exchange. And in maybe 50 to 60 years, there will be a lot of blurring of the lines of these social constructs of identity. Of I'm an African American, I'm a Ghanaian, I'm a Kenyan, or I'm a continental African, or I'm a Colombian. And you will see more people identify as one thing because we'll be able to understand our unified struggle.
Mm-hmm. You and I, Doctor, we are having this conversation at such an interesting time politically in the U.S. The elections are coming up later this year, and the former President Donald Trump could be one of the candidates that will be contesting the upcoming election, and there is a strong likelihood that he might be the next president of the United States. I'm keen to find out, Dr. El Malik, what would Donald Trump's presidency mean for the Black History Month movement in the U.S. should Donald Trump comes back to be the president of the U.S.?
I wanted to give a real quick quip and say it would mean the same thing that Joe Biden's presidency meant to the Black History movement. We're non-political in terms of this understanding of our history, and as I pointed out before, we have been struggling and fighting against injustice since the very inception of the idea of African Americans back in 1619. So no matter who is in the White House, our struggle continues.
The struggle continues indeed. Just as we wrap up this conversation, Dr. El Malik, any last word on your side?
I just want to say to all the listeners, there is a growing sentiment among African Americans and a growing desire for us to reconnect with the continent, right? And I think one of the ways we do that is through our history, to learn more about the nations in which we originate, Ghana, Nigeria, Mali, but as well as there's a sentiment that we want to connect with the continent, with real continental African people. We want to come, we want to invest, we want to build homes and start businesses and have this intercontinental exchange. So I just want your listeners to know that look forward to the future where there is this synergy built between the continent, Africans in the East and Africans in the West. We love y'all. We know that we are family, and that it's time to have a family reunion.
But for those who are listening to this conversation and they would like to read up on those synergies that you are talking about and to read up on Black history, which books perhaps, Doctor, can you recommend?
Oh man, can I recommend some good reading? Dr. John Henry Clark to start. Definitely, I would say start with Dr. John Henry Clark. Start with Frantz Fanon. Start with Chancellor Williams. Start with Amos Wilson. Start with Steve Biko. Yeah. Right, because he's not right. He's not Black. You don't have we have a Black consciousness movement in South Africa, but that Black consciousness movement inspired a Black consciousness movement in the United States. So I would say, they're great. It's far too many to even begin to just start to name, but those individuals that I started to call out, please check. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention sisters like the author of the ISIS papers, Dr. Frances Cress Wesseling, or Dr. Ivan Van Sertima, who was actually a Ghanaian brother from Guyanese, I should say Guyanese brother. So all of those individuals, start just wherever you can. And if you do not want to start with old Afrocentric books, there are great people like Cornel West, Race Matters, and Dr. Michael Eric Dyson, or Dr. Mark Lamont Hill. All of these are titans. Dr. Eddie Glaude. All of these are titans. Eddie Glaude from Princeton. These are titans in this space of understanding the African American condition, both historically and contemporarily.
Titans in the space indeed. Dr. El Malik, it has been a pleasure having you with us here on Africa Tonight, Doctor. Thank you so much for giving us your time.
Thank you so much. You have a good one.
That podcast was courtesy of Channel Africa, the African perspective.